this is hopefully a short conversation that I'll be having with Shankara Bharadwaj, who, according to me, is essentially a scriptural scholar, and as part-time, he has got some other profession that he practices to put bread on the table. But his primary personality is one of a scholar. So when we gather information, there's always this question mark over how authentic or not the source is, regardless of the motivations of the person. May have really made a genuine attempt at appreciating what's there in the scriptures. And one of the problems I sense is also that we have so many scriptures like Valmiki Ramayana. So this particular one was the difference between Valmiki Ramayana and Tulsidas Ramayana. And I do realize that when they made the video, they don't recognize that there are actually many forms of Valmiki Ramayana or many versions of Valmiki Ramayana. Tulsidas may be just one. I don't know if there are any more, but it seemed like that was one. And so, therefore, what took me by surprise were some things that I thought uh, were fairly common and accepted. And the first one that took me by surprise was he says that in the Valmiki Ramayana, that Ravana gets killed with one chest shot by an arrow. Whereas he says that the Tulsidasa Ramayana is the one where the life elixir is in the navel. Vibhishana squeals on him and betrays him, and therefore Rama takes the opportunity and shoots him in the navel.
Right.
Always my understanding was that it was a naval shot and it was not just a chest shot, but I was surprised therefore by the narrative. So I thought maybe something like that.
The Valmiki version is that, or the version, the original is that before this duel between Rama and Ravana, or when it is just about to begin, Indra sends his chariot along with the divine charioteer Matali, and then as the battle progresses towards the end, Matali actually suggests that now Ravana is sufficiently tired. You apply the Brahmastra and he will die. Then Rama he shoots it in the chest and then he dies.
Oh, so it is genuinely a chest shot.
Yes. Genuinely, I didn't.
Genuinely a arrow that goes through the chest.
Yes. It's a proper killing. As a duel progresses, the Brahmastra is there, and so this Amrita Bhanda, all that is definitely, but that is quite famous and popular, not just in Manas, but many other regions also.
Okay.
Even folk versions also, other folk versions also, it's there.
Okay.
So differences, but do you see these as differences, or that's the main question?
So I'll tell you why this stood out for me, because there's this whole narrative about Vibhishana being a traitor, and him and how Vibhishana is looked at in the modern Indian context. I mean, one reality is nobody names their sons Vibhishana. So that whereas he's one of the Chiranjeevis, he's seen as somebody who sides with Dharma, but our modern society looks down upon it. So is it? But if that narrative is not there in the Valmiki Ramayana, then we are needlessly so to say, crucifying a guy who would otherwise be a follower of Dharma in modern society.
Vibhishana, but Vibhishana, his respect is there, but there are other aspects to it, the loyalty to brotherhood and all those things.
Yeah.
So if you choose your dharma above your brothers, then that's it's always a comparison between Kumbhakarna and Vibhishana, let us say.
Yeah.
But it's not as if Vibhishana did not cooperate in terms of on the Amrita Bhanda and all that is a legend. But let us say Indrajit is there. There are occasions where Vibhishana actively, in fact, he fought on the Vanara side. So obviously he is going to cooperate on this side and say that what needs to be done.
Right.
That would be there. And when Shukasarana came, for instance. So whatever Vibhishana's role is there positively on the Vanara side, it is there.
Right.
He would be naturally loyal to that side, which crowned him as king of Lanka.
Right. So, which is what the interesting bit was for me is that just if you just took the Valmiki Ramayana, how even in popular perception, you'll start looking at Vibhishana differently, or you might. Whereas if you look at if you stay with Tulsidasa Ramayana, it's far more easier to condemn him as a traitor. So that was one thing that stood out for me. The other one, and again not as radical, but was that Hanumana was a Vanara, which is basically more man from the forest and from the forest tribes, whereas Tulsidasa has him as a monkey. And so because the key thing that changes with that, I mean, in itself is not such a big deal, but the whole story about how his tail was lit on fire and he burnt down Lanka is therefore.
Yeah, but he did burn down Lanka even in Valmiki.
Oh, he did.
That is there. Obviously, burning down Lanka is there. That is.
So the thing is, when he burns down Lanka, if he has no tail, is there another way that he burns Lanka in Valmiki versus Tulsidasa?
No, not as far as I recall. Valmiki also, the not having tail is not the thing. Tail would be there. But yeah, it's possible that we probably just read the things into it. I need to go back. But as far as I recall, the tail thing is not the differentiator. That would still be there.
Okay.
But there would be differences in the narration and things like that.
Right. Because when you say that he is a man and not a monkey, then the first thing that happens is the tail disappears.
And yeah, but Vanara is, I don't know whether you really say Vanara is just a man of the forest or something like that.
So therefore, what you are saying is that the interpretation that somebody says that Vanara is a man from the forest and man, a human, not being a monkey, is probably not the right way to interpret the Valmiki Ramayana.
So Vanara is, yeah, like man only, but is it really man? We don't know, because I mean, it's not just Hanuman, right? There is there are the Jambukas, not
Correct.
Jambukas, the Jambavantas,
correct.
The bears are there.
Yeah.
The Bhalukas are there. There are many other forms also there in the Vanara army, not just the monkey forms.
Yeah.
In that sense, we can't really say they were all men with in the forest or things like that. So there would be more to it, but we just don't know.
Right. No, and in my mind, it was always when we talk about these different tribes, the bear tribe or the monkey tribe, and there's always this debate: are they man or not man? But there's no way to really know it. But maybe there were some of them were Neanderthal species or Cro-Magnon species or Denisovian species,
and these people were able to communicate.
and they were able to communicate somehow. So I mean, who knows?
Exactly, we don't know. And all this is going to be, again, I think of what timelines we are talking. Is it really millions of years ago?
Right.
Is it really just the human history, or we don't know all that?
Right. Or if it is in fact, I don't know if it is in fact in this dimension of our existence or some other dimension, is also a question that sort of keeps coming up.
It could be a mix, definitely. There would be definitely a human dimension, because Itihasa definitely has a human dimension. It would have an astronomical dimension. It would have the spiritual dimension. All this would be there.
Right.
But other dimensions we have missed.
Yeah. No, there was another comment that they made right at the very beginning. They say that it is the Ramayana is the Adi Kavya. And Adi Kavya, this is the first poem that was written. Maybe it was the Adi Kavya. I mean, there is no, I mean, when you look at Kavyas, they are Ramayana and Mahabharata. And the question is it Kavya in that sense? I mean, can it really be called Adi Kavya, or are some of the other scriptures also in the nature of Kavya? So, for example, some of the Vedas are also recited in a poetic sort of sense. So, I don't know. I mean, the Vedas are not called Kavya.
It's not called Kavya, but it's slightly confusing, but that's what it is.
Right. And so, is this right to say that
Kavinam, so that Kavi is a seer? There is a legend in the beginning, right, where they say Ramayana is definitely Adi Kavya.
Okay.
And that is appropriate to call it Adikavya, because the word shloka comes with Valmiki.
Right.
With that story where the two birds are there copulating, then the hunter shoots one and Valmiki's expression comes out, and then that is what he calls a shloka.
Right.
And Ramayana is the first composition of shlokas. So in that sense, it is definitely Adikavya.
Okay. The one other, and there's been some discussion around this in the past. I think we make a clear distinction between the Valmiki Ramayana narrates Rama as a man who transitions to a king, and the way they describe it is he is subsequently or worshipped as God. They don't. So it's as if in his lifetime there was no recognition of godhood or divinity. I mean, I think just the word God is also a bit wrong when people use it so commonly. Whereas in Tulsidasa Ramayana, he is Bhagwan right from the very beginning, and many people in the storyline know him as divinity or know him as God. So that's the distinction that they make in terms of knowledge of divinity right from the word go. Whereas in Valmiki,
this will be actually we probably take one step back and then come to this question in the sense Ramayana is the original. And whoever is re-rendering, he is re-rendering, and he's saying that he is re-rendering Valmiki's Ramayana only.
Right.
It is his experience, but it's not as if he is trying to differ from Valmiki. Neither Tulsidas nor any other re-rendering. They are loyal to Valmiki, but they are giving their own impression of what they understand from Valmiki. So let us say this avatar aspect is there. This difference many people indicate. Mahabharata also say, many people say that Krishna is, more human in Mahabharata and more divine in Bhagavata. But is it really so? Yes and no. If you see Ramayana, there are rishis, especially in the Vanaparva, there are rishis waiting for Rama to come before they take moksha. Now Shabari is there, Jatayu is there. Rama has instantly given moksha to him, then Sampati. So all these definitely indicate the divinity of Ramayana. Otherwise, how can he give moksha to anybody?
Right.
So it's not as if Ramayana of Valmiki does not explicitly take cognizance of Rama's divinity. But it's definitely not in the shape in which the re-renderings indicate.
Right.
In the sense you look at it from the beginning, this is how it is and all that. The beginning of Ramayana, if you see, it is most definitely the best way to describe an avatar. The conversation between Valmiki and Narada. Valmiki says all the Kalyana Gunas, all the divine qualities, and says, is there any possible human with all these qualities? It is impossible nearly, because all these are divine qualities. In humans, you are probably going to see one or two qualities, but all these are impossible to see in a human. Then Narada says there is. So you are actually saying all the divine qualities present in one human. Obviously, that is going to be an incarnation. There is nothing to debate it.
Right.
But do you, all this kind of terminology, right? It's an avatara, it is not an avatara. This is more jugglery of words rather than, but explicitly taking that the divine has in its all forms or all full presence manifested into Rama, that has been quite clear in Valmiki Ramayana.
Okay. So it's probably Tulsidas has got a more explicit recognition in that sense.
And the terminology that later developed.
Yeah. It's also probably a function of the age in which Tulsidasa lived, which is this is during the lifetime of Akbar. So a large influence of complete, unquestioned obedience to God, and those ideas are already there amongst the ruling classes.
Probably to make things more explicit to the common man, saying, yes, this is what divinity is, kind of thing.
Yeah, probably so. There is, and while it was not in this video, there is also, and I can fairly say that I've only read modern versions of Ramayana of various kinds. I've not had the courage to pick up any of those volumes and read through them in any great detail. But there is a lot of debate that I've heard and I've spoken to people as well. There have been some confusing elements over here, and I thought maybe I'll also use this opportunity to ask those of you. So there are two things that in my mind stood out amongst a lot of these conversations that I gathered from the past. One was it talks about the nature of Sita. And there is this whole description that Sita in the Tulsidasa Ramayana is very subservient and is meek and is kind of victim. Whereas in the Valmiki Ramayana and many other versions of Ramayana, she is very assertive. She is not meek by any standards. She is in many ways a good equal to her husband. And it's a portrayal of an extremely courageous, strong woman. It's not a meek person that needs protection, which is why, and the subsequent comment in which lots of commentators talk about it, is that the whole idea of Lakshman Rekha is in the more newer versions or newer renderings of the Ramayana, which is Tulsidas and around them. Whereas the older ones, which is from the Valmiki Ramayana, Lakshmana doesn't need to do a Lakshman Rekha. And I mean, Sita is quite strong in herself.
Strong or not, she was definitely taken away. So
yeah, absolutely.
But Lakshman Rekha is not there in Valmiki. Obviously, it's a later. It's there Tulsidas rendering. There are other renderings also which have the Lakshman Rekha.
So there was one other bit that sort of which I didn't expect. Which somebody said to me, said that in the Tulsidasa Ramayana there is one part of the Ramayana which describes Ram's exile from Ayodhya, and his first day of exile is to Rishi's ashram, and when he goes there, he's served fresh meat. So because he's a Kshatriya, he's served in the Rishi's ashram meat. Now, what took me by surprise was this description that says, and I've tried to locate it without any success in various English translations of Tulsidasa Ramayana. What was described is when he goes to that Rishi's ashram, he's served with meat which is of a newborn calf. So it's not any other animal. I mean, it is cow meat and a newborn cow. I was a bit surprised because Tulsidasa obviously comes in a much later period, so I can imagine much earlier renderings being a little more neutral to beef eating. But I was fairly certain in my head that by the time it came to Tulsidasa's Ramayana,
that was not thinkable.
Correct. So there was this clear understanding that you don't eat a cow. But here, there was this person who was asserting that in the Tulsidasa Ramayana, maybe there are versions of Tulsidasa Ramayana. Again, I don't know, maybe the version that I picked didn't have it, and there are some other versions out there. But I thought I'll also ask that if there is any.
Frankly, I'm not aware of this. I will need to, but I'll. Now that this topic is there, it's important. I'll check this.
Yeah. So that was there were some one or two other. I mean, there were some minor points about how many wives.
If it is Valmiki, let us say you can argue about the interpretation, the meaning from Sanskrit and all that. If it is an Avadhi, I think it would be fairly straightforward as a term.
Yeah.
Unless the word is lost in these 2-3 centuries or something, it's very unlikely. We'll need to check that.
Yeah. Then there is. Which again, I sort of hear some people say it, but in the Valmiki Ramayana, the real Sita is abducted. Whereas in the Tulsidasa Ramayana, at the time of the Agni Pariksha, when Lakshmana challenges Rama, he says that actually the real Sita is protected by Agni, and the one who was abducted was not a real Sita.
So this is where the divine versus the human aspect difference clearly comes out. So in Tulsi, it is very clearly divine. It's not a human acting there. So so Sita was given into Agni, and then she had to be retrieved from Agni. So there is an Agni Pariksha and all that. So it's not exactly a Pariksha. you're doing it to retrieve whatever you have given.
Right. They were also
but Valmiki is more important for us to understand. In fact, and this is what is also a subject of a lot of contention, right? So, is there an Agni Pariksha in Valmiki in the first place?
Yeah.
Because and here is where the human dynamic is more clearly understandable from Valmiki Ramayana. Firstly, she is taken away by Ravana, right? Then Rama goes, he does all the war, then he kills Ravana, then Sita is freed, Lanka is freed, then Vibhishana is established there. Sita is freed, and then she is told that now you are free, you can go wherever you want. Why is this done in the first place? And then why does she choose to get into the fire? And this is the point on which a lot of this liberal criticism also comes and all that. But that is also establishing what they don't see. Now Ravana took her away. After he is killed, somebody else will take her away. Where exactly is her will established? Right? As an individual, she has her choice. And that choice is established through this. Now she is formally given her freedom. She has formally made her choice. She is saying that I am coming with you, not out of compulsion. Now I can't just make a empty promise by saying that I like you, because now that you have freed me, I might actually just follow you by compulsion, or just because you are my husband. Beyond all this, she has actually demonstrated her will to go with him, not as a compulsion or anything.
Right.
She has herself made an explicit choice and demonstrated she can go to any extent to be with him. Rama has demonstrated his will to be with her at any cost. Through the previous months, he has searched for her, he has done that war, he has freed her up. Now she also is demonstrating her will through that act.
Right.
It's this whole thing becomes is spun into a very different direction of the chastity, all that bullshit. Frankly, there is no such discussion that comes at that point. Because whatever would have happened, Rama has the culture to not discuss it, because whatever would have happened under the captivity is beyond her control.
Right.
So none of that gets discussed. What gets discussed is her choice.
Right.
And which is how an ideal man is supposed to conduct.
Which is an important distinction that you make is, because I'm coming from, I consider myself a fairly liberal sort of a person. And Rama as a character, at least in my head, always has sort of, and they're conflicting ideas. But one of my ideas, which conflicts with another idea, was that he was this, exactly as you described it, he was this person who sort of had a certain view of his wife, which is not appropriate, which imposes some sort of primacy over that you have not, whether forcibly or otherwise, not slept with another man. And that primacy for sexual sort of fidelity, so to say. And what you're just describing is that it's almost a bit of a non-issue in the Valmiki Ramayana. It may have been true, but it's not.
No.
Okay.
So in the episode after Ravana's killing and Rama and Sita traveling back, there is absolutely no mention of any such thing.
Right.
That is very clear.
Right.
That is a non-issue between Rama and Sita. That becomes an issue much later in the Uttarakanda, where the people of Ayodhya start.
True.
So that's a different episode.
Yeah. And to my mind, that's stood. So when I look at other historical figures, in my head, the contrast was so stark. So I don't know if you're aware of, again, it's fictional depiction, and there's not so much story of Genghis Khan. He's seen as a scoundrel or a crook otherwise, but there are other narrations of Chingiz which are very favorable to him. And one of them is that he's in love with this girl and he's married to her, and she gets abducted by an enemy, and she spends months with that enemy. And finally, when Chingiz is able to retrieve her, she's pregnant with the enemy's child. And that child is one of Chingiz's favorite sons. So, to me, it felt so large-hearted in one way. Is that it is not his wife's fault that she gets subjected to this, and he doesn't hold it against her. He doesn't hold it against the child.
And Shastra also says that, right? Vijay and Kshetra, whatever child comes out, ultimately it belongs to that new father, wherever, who is
True.
now the husband. So that holds here also. Of course, in Ramayana it's not that relevant, but yeah, Rama not only doesn't hold, I mean, that topic never comes.
True. And so therefore the hypocrisy in the debate is this focus on fidelity when you or the fact,
Exactly.
people seem to miss out
Which
that
is not even
not there. True.
Exactly.
As you're describing, there is no such focus in the Valmiki Ramayana. It may have been in the Tulsidasa Ramayana, which is much later.
That is also not there from what you are saying, because that whole topic is eliminated by putting the divine there.
Right.
That is the approach that Tulsi takes. Tulsi Goswami takes to remove this whole.
Right.
So there also he is not getting into that fidelity, all that topic.
Right.
And his way of removing that and bringing focus to Rama and divinity is not treating it as an episode.
I understand. So what you're saying is that actually, even in Tulsidasa Ramayana, there is no question mark over fidelity, etc. So Tulsidas narrates it differently in terms of that she's protected by Agni and there is a fake Sita. And when she enters the Agni, the fake one disappears and the true one comes out. And in Valmiki, it's a non-issue. There's not even a discussion about something like this. So it is so stark, and it is tragic in my mind that in popular imagination, this is. I would include myself. In my mind, it was one of the big issues.
Why would Rama have to? Yeah.
Absolutely. Ultimately, she's a victim. So why will you victimize a victim even further?
Exactly. And if you do it, how are you exactly an ideal human?
Absolutely. And as I was saying, there was this one character of Rama, which is portrayed in common parlance. They are priests and they are people who would think of non-liberals also will say things like this. Yeah. Whereas on the other hand, I've heard. So I don't know if you're sort of semi-mystical guy called Rohit Arya, and I heard his description of Rama, and he describes him as Naravagara, which is basically man in a tiger in a man's skin kind of description, which to me sounds like a very different description from what you see on television serials. So he's not a smiling, nice guy looking benevolent at all times. He's capable of being extremely violent at the drop of an hat if needed. Otherwise, he might be at complete peace with himself. But this is the description, therefore, from as he was narrating it in the Valmiki Ramayana, is not a man that you will trifle with. So he might be a very peaceful guy, very kind looking, and you don't trifle with him only because he's king or he's a prince. It is just that he is capable of such extreme violence that you don't want to try your tricks over there. Yeah. And that is probably the truer nature of Rama. And so then you can sort of see how it's truer. But I wanted to ask
if we see all the qualities, the full spectrum that is described right in the beginning.
Yeah.
Yes, he's valorous and all that, but there is also a code of conduct.
Yeah.
He can tolerate abuse.
Yeah.
And he would apply disproportionate force only where it calls for.
Yeah.
Right. There is also a code of conduct where you don't use force on people who are weak.
Yeah.
Even if they abuse, you tolerate it.
Yeah.
So Rama is a very Shanta Swabhava, all this that holds. Now, where the war comes, it's a different thing. There also, it's not his word speaking, right? So it's action speaking.
Yeah.
His bow and arrows that are speaking.
But it's probably also not one of those guys that you will just have casual conversations with. His personality is such that it's probably not a very approachable personality. He might be a very nice guy, but it's not.
He's
You can have nice
approachable, not
people.
reproachable.
Yeah. So you can't just trifle. I mean, you can't trifle with
Yeah,
him.
obviously. I mean, he's not your equal that you, play prank, all these things.
True. And that not your equal is not necessarily because of royalty. It's because of the
Correct. As a
character.
personality, he is, yes.
Yeah. And so it's a very different personality as portrayed when you look at television serials and Bollywood. We do a great injustice to a man.
Yeah, somebody, an extremely lofty man, let us say. Why would anybody, any common man like us, go and talk rubbish with him?
Yeah.
In what capacity?
Yeah.
To what end?
Yeah. No, in today's world, you will find that people are happy to talk rubbish with anybody.
So, exactly. That's because you are not taught, that culture is not taught.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a matter of our character that we don't do loose talk with certain people of certain stature and all that.
Yeah.
In fact, Ramayana itself, Rama says, when that Shurpanakha episode happens, eventually Rama tells Lakshmana, see, this is how it happens. If pranks go wrong, we should make fun only with our equals. Because eventually they do make fun of her, Shurpanakha.
Right.
And then she gets angry and all that happens.
Right.
It's not that she should take to extreme steps because of that, but then Rama kind of tells it in some versions. So we have to, make fun only with our equals.
Right. So there is there was one other thing that caught my attention, and we have this general description of Ravana. I mean, in some versions, we also call him Sundar Ravana in the southern Ramayana versions. So extremely handsome guy, very knowledgeable, outstanding leader, outstanding ruler.
Yes.
So all of that, he has got one big deficiency, which is his ego. But he's very often described, and all of that many of us have heard. We have also heard that he's a great Shiv Bhakta. In the sense that he has also the audacity to, when he goes to Mount Kailash, ask Shiva for his wife. And Shiva doesn't mind it because he's such a great Bhakta. But that's the nature. But we hear of Ravana's relationship with divinity in the sense of with Shiva. This narrative says that in the Tulsidas version, apparently, that when he is going to battle with Rama, and I've heard the other way as well, that Rama does exactly that, is that he worships Durga to be able to defeat Rama. And there's also the other version where Rama for 9 days, which is the Navratri, calls upon the Devi divinity to be able to vanquish Ravana. So that version I read, this is the first time I actually am hearing Ravana worshipping the Devi. So I was a bit surprised, but it also creates a slightly different perspective, because when we think of Durga, when we think of the Devi, we think of her not necessarily in the sort of the Shaiva Vaishnav classification. We think of her as a crossover between both those. And here was Ravana now worshipping Durga, and Durga particularly is what it's not just Kali or somebody like that. He's worshipping Durga to draw that energy. And Durga is this special deity, a special form of Shakti who is armed by various devatas. So in that sense, when he worships Durga, he is also calling upon the energy from the devatas to defeat Rama. So that it sounded like a very interesting thing. But again, I wanted to check with you if there's any truth to something like that, and what's your view on Ravana being a Devi worshipper as well?
I don't know, but it's not impossible. But more than that, what is the path that Ravana has taken in his life? It's more a path of tapas.
Right.
He's not a yajna guy. In fact, we have to the contrary that he has gone after rishis who have been doing yajnas, all these things.
Yeah.
In the Uttar Ramayana, there is also indication where he actually, Indrajit, Meghanada does the yajnas and Ravana criticizes him.
Yeah.
So you should not be doing yajnas which please devatas. You need to do tapas, please only Brahma and Rudra. you should not strengthen your enemies by doing these yajnas.
Right.
So his path is kind of indicated there. It's nothing to do with Shaiva, Vaishnava, Shakta kind of distinctions. That I agree.
So it sort of was surprising when I heard that he worships Durga to be able to defeat
Bhakta also is like, is he genuinely, how much of a Bhakta he is? All this is debatable.
Right.
Now, going by versions, or in fact, we know the other side also. Something like when he stops by the Kailasa, he sees Shiva's power, and then he starts worshipping.
Right.
It's not as if his heart automatically melts for Shiva or anything. It's not that he is a devotee at heart or anything. He is just doing it because now he has seen the power of the other guy. He is appeasing.
Right.
That's also one version.
Right.
Ravana as a Shiva Bhakta, it's quite a popular version, but not exactly 100% accurate. He has been worshipping Shiva, but how much of a genuine bhakti it is, let us say the kind of bhakti Arjuna has for Krishna.
Right.
Nothing of that sort you will find. Or Bali towards Vishnu.
Right.
That we won't find in Ravana.
So there is this other interesting facet that, again, not part of the video, but sort of has always popped in my head, is that Ravana is seen as a Rakshasa. So though he is Pulastya's descendant, he is seen as a Rakshasa because his mother was a Rakshasi.
Yes.
And so he therefore seems to have come from some sort of matrilineal lineage, where he takes more from his mother's legacy than his father's legacy. To describe, because he's not so easily described as a Brahmin. He is more described as a Rakshasa.
Because it's not as much about being a Brahmin or not. Because so when you talk of the Prajapati, Pulastya Prajapati, his son Vishravas, and then his son is Vaishravana. Ravana is also Vishrava's son. Kubera is also his son.
Right.
This is not exactly about the Brahmanya or anything. The Varna, all this whole thing is not really applicable. Not entirely inapplicable, but that's not the dynamic operating there. He is a descendant of a Prajapati. So in that capacity, he is regarded very high in the entire scheme of things in the creation.
I see that in a bit of a contrast. So there is this Ravana, which is son of a Brahmin and a Rakshasi. So there was, what I was in my head, there was always this. So there's this Ravana and his characterization, and then there is Vyasa, who is Parashara and a fisherwoman's son, and he is always seen as a Brahmin. He's never seen as fisherwoman's son. So here is a Rakshasi son who is seen more as a Rakshasa, and a fisherwoman's son is not seen as a fisherwoman's son. He's seen as a. So it is interesting.
No, here is where the mix-up comes. It's not as if Vyasa is treated as a Brahmin anywhere.
Oh, is it?
He is a Rishi. Okay. So when you talk of Rishi, that whole Varna thing is gone, right? He's not even seen as part of this. He is seen as something beyond all this.
Yes.
So he comes and goes at different places in different ways, all these things. It's not as if he is even treated as a Vipra. I mean, there are Brahmins that Sudama, all these people are treated as Brahmins. Drona is treated as a Brahmin. We don't see exactly similar treatment, right? Vyasa is always put one pedestal up, one level up. That is not the case with Ravana in many places. Because he's leave the Rakshasa or Brahman, all these things. Fundamentally, he is a king.
Right.
So he has dealt with other people as a king, as the king of Lanka. So that is the dynamic applying there. Now there is a king, that fellow is a bad fellow. So people have their own fears towards them or their own, disgust towards them. Whatever that feeling is, what is coming. It's not as if because he is a Rakshasa or anything, or because he's a Brahmin or anything. It's typically, it's your character that is rewarded. Or, that is what attracts or disgusts people about us, our character. Right. Position can only probably attract people or, scare people. But when it comes to the individual, it is the character.
Right.
So when Ravana messes with Kartavirya and then he's shown his place,
Yes.
He's thrown into the jail. Then Pulastya Brahma comes himself, and then obviously that respect, friendship, all these come because of his position, saying, "Okay, you're descendant of such a great guy. Now, yeah, I'll treat you with due affection and all that." But as a character, he has not shown himself very respect worthy in that episode. There are other episodes, let us say, when he fights with the Devatas, all these things. These are not things where he derives respect, attracts respect. There are other episodes, his tapas is there, or for instance, the first encounter between Hanuman and Ravana, first encounter between Rama and Ravana. They do take cognizance of his, brightness and all these things. But it is overshadowed by his other qualities.
Right.
So no, he is treated as a Rakshasa, or he is simply treated as another king. What Rama talks to Ravana is simply seeing him as a king of Lanka.
Right.
Nothing else. I mean, it's a lot of this baggage, that modern baggage that we carry in terms of identities and all these things, which don't actually reflect into that epic. It's more reading things into the epic rather than reading out of it.
Right. No, it's very useful. There's, and I was always aware that the Tulsidasa Ramayana stops at the coronation of Rama. And then there were other versions of Ramayana. Oh, sorry, the Valmiki Ramayana stops at the coronation of Rama.
Yeah, but Uttar Ramayana is there. I mean, there is debate around this. Uttar Ramayana is part of Ramayana. It's not part of Ramayana.
Right.
But but if you say that Ramayana is Sankhya Vidya, if you say that Ramayana is 24,000 shlokas, that 24,000 includes the Uttar Ramayana.
Oh, it does.
Yeah.
And so, would you say that the Uttarakhanda is part of the Valmiki Ramayana also, or is it sort of?
It is. Now, at what part people treat only the 6 kandas and not the 7th kanda? This is people have gone both ways on that.
Okay.
But if you are to take it as 24,000, it would include everything.
Right.
The 6 don't make up to 24,000.
Right. So the story of Love Kusha, of Sita's exile, the fisherman's story, living with Valmiki in his ashrama, etc. is
all that is there in Uttarakhand. In fact, a lot of these stories, like Ravana going all over to Bali, to all these things are there in Uttarakhand only.
Okay.
And the other stories, there are a lot of Dharmashastra things also, where there is a dog that goes to Rama. I mean, the post-coronation of Rama, whatever things are there in the Uttarakhand only.
Right.
In fact, that Shambhuka episode, all that, I mean, people tend to shy away from it. So they say Uttarakhand is later interpolation, all those things.
Right.
But I mean, it's not as if we have to see it separately.
No, it is. I mean, we in India specifically know of Rama very clearly, and there's a lot of respect, and he's viewed as a god, divinity, etc. What I've also noticed is that the legend of Rama is actually not just limited only to India and not only to Southeast Asia. So Rama is actually spread out in various parts of Europe and the Middle East. And there are elements of the Ramayana in various local legends. So he's clearly a much greater king than we think of him. We tend to think of him only in the context of Bharata, but he's actually much beyond that.
Yeah, and others also have their own Ayodhyas.
Yeah, absolutely. So Southeast Asia, many of us
it's well known. Yes.
What we don't notice is it's also part of the legend, in the older legend in Europe. So may not be Western Europe, but more sort of Central Europe. Is part of some of the underlying legend in the Middle East. So the legend, he obviously is ruling across in all those regions. His rule is not limited only to Russia as we see it today. In contrast, while they talk about Yudhishthira ruling the world, but Yudhishthira's legend, or even to that extent, Krishna's legend is fairly limited to Bharatavarsha, and some of it goes to Southeast Asia. But therefore, it does seem to be that is a story of a smaller kingdom, and their impact is not as widespread as Rama. Now, Rama is much older. And
Bharata knows of its Ramayana, right? It narrates Ramayana as part of it.
So it does seem that. So when you look at the more popular sort of narrative, the modern Indian narrative, I won't call it liberal or not, but the modern Indian narrative finds lots of fault in him, finds lesser fault strangely in Krishna, and finds Krishna more endearing. And a little more critical of Rama, whereas it seems to me that the historical Rama had much greater impact in the
historical
world.
Yeah, that is I mean, you can argue either ways, because people tend to say Rama is Vigrahavan Dharma and Krishna is actually been cutting corners all over. So that's another. But yeah, I mean, Rama as the perfect human, the ideal human, it's spread much wider, and which is probably also why you see much more symbolism in Ramayana, and which is what also makes it. Mahabharata, it's very clear, it's all a human narrative with a spiritual meaning, astronomical meaning. Ramayana also mixes some other aspects which we are still not clear what they are, unless we probably unravel a lot of layers of it.
So one other question that to end this, I think you have to go to the other talk shortly. But one other question that I wanted to sort of, again, I've said this at various public forums as well, including on some Sangam talks, and received fair bit of criticism for it. I'm very happy to do that. It's all a learning process in my head. It's not one way or the other. This comparison between Rama and Krishna as individuals, and more when you take a woman's perspective. So if you're, and I pose this very often as a trick question, and I see how people react to it. So when you say that, would you like to be Rama's wife or Krishna's wife? And thing is, Rama is very dedicated to his one wife, and Krishna is dedicated to all the wives that he has. How many?
He has done justice to everybody. So
he's done justice to everybody. But most women will say that I want to be Rama's wife. So I don't know. Very few pick Krishna in this. And then you explain it a little further. You say that, look at Rama's wife. She had a miserable existence. And of course, you use a normal narrative of Agni Pariksha, etc. Not the one that you were describing, but you say that, look, he put her through fire. He doubted her. He did not take into account that she was a victim. He treated her like this. Ultimately, some dhobi said something, so he chased her out of his whatever, he gave her up, whatever you call it, but ultimately the factual
bit together with her husband, correct?
He's driven away. Krishna's wives loved him, all of them, and nobody had any such complaint. I mean, he didn't care what anybody said about any of his wives. He even had a relationship with Radha, which is not a wife. Probably went on to be somebody else's wife. When you look at that, then how would you like to be? And a lot of women will say that actually I might prefer being Krishna's wife rather than Rama's, because being Rama's wife is your wife to a great king, but not necessarily a great husband. Whereas Krishna is, you're not the wife of a king, but you're a wife of a great husband.
So that's not what Sita says about Rama.
Yeah. She says that was the question that I wanted to ask.
From her own perspective, he was always the ideal husband, the best one that could ever be. So that there is nothing much to compare in that sense. But Krishna's situation was very different. Krishna's life did not go through a personal crisis the way Rama's life did.
Yeah.
There he lost his kingdom, then the wife, then eventually he separated, all those. That's not how Krishna's life goes. At the philosophical level, these are two different views, right? Rama is Purusha of Sankhya and Krishna is Ishvara of Yoga. So the way Krishna is associated with Maya would be very different from the way Rama is associated with Prakriti.
Right.
So in that sense, the way the story proceeds also would be very different.
So when you say Purusha of Sankhya, what is it that you mean? If you could just explain that a bit.
that is where this whole 24,000 is what I was saying, because Rama is or Ramayana is said to be a Sankhya Vidya. So the Gayatri is 24 letters, 24,000 slokas of Ramayana mapped to the 24 Gayatri letters, which is a Sankhya Vidya. And then Rama Sita relation, which are the Maulika Ardhas. So Purusha Prakriti, Samyoga, Viyoga, they come together, they separate. This whole, the Maulika Ardhas of Sankhya, all these are directly visible in the big scheme of Ramayana story.
Right.
So you can very much see Rama as the Purusha of Sankhya. He's initially bound by Prakriti, then he's liberated by Prakriti, all these things. And Krishna, anyway, a lot of people know as Yogeshwara, all these things. It's repeatedly accepted there in Gita and several other places in the Mahabharata. So it's very easy for people to see him as a Yogeshwara and all that. Yeah, he is the Ishvara of yoga.
Right, right. And clearly, yoga is a very different tradition from Sankhya. I mean, they're somehow connected.
Yes and no, but Sankhya is more the Jnana Marga and all that. Yoga is giving you the techniques to realize Sankhya only. Ultimately, what it is revealing to you is the knowledge of Purusha and
True.
But here you are seeing a more liberated man, whereas in Ramayana you are seeing a man bound by Prakriti and eventually liberated. In Krishna's story, you are seeing somebody who is liberated from the beginning.
Right.
So in that sense, any misery in him.
Yeah. Krishna is always aware that he is divine.
He is always beyond all the bounds from the beginning.
Yeah. And so therefore, if I were to sort of restate my sort of conversation over there, maybe for a lot of the women, the one way to look at it is to look and find what is closer to the truer Ramayana. Is not just what is there in Amar Chitra Katha or the popular narrative. Is that for Rama, there was a non-issue. Sex was a non-issue. It did not crop up in the conversation. He was completely his wife's husband, and there was no doubt about it. Even in the Tulsidasa, where there is the Agni Pariksha, it is not as if there is doubt, but he
wanted to circumvent this whole topic itself. That is why he took that divine plot.
Yeah. And so Tulsidasa also describes it like that. We tend to sort of overlook the fact that he describes it as Mayavi Sita going into the fire and the real Sita coming out. So that is the essence of Tulsidasa's Agni Pariksha also. And we tend to miss that out. So he is, and there is no, so it comes down to then the Uttarakhanda, is that whether there is that Dhobi complaint and he asks his wife.
Yeah, which is where again, if we see epic as pedagogic, right? I mean, it is telling a story. So what is the point? Whether he lived and he died, whatever happened. Yeah. It is, for us, the lesson is what is compiled for us. Whether it is Rama's episode, then subsequent episode. It's not as if one Dhobi says it and this whole thing happens. The spy that gathers information, he comes back and says, this is what people have been widely saying.
Yeah.
And this is creating a credibility crisis for us.
Right.
Which is when Rama makes that decision. Now, is that the right thing is the question. Can you punish one innocent woman for the sake of? But that is where the importance of blemishless character or personality of the leader is coming out so prominently there. It's not about what suffering you take, but you definitely need to ensure that there is absolutely zero stain on you, right? Which is what Rama holds up himself to, without which he doesn't think he has the credibility to rule, to govern.
Right.
Look at the leaders today. And that is the comparison you got to do. People often take to what happened to Sita, but yeah, I mean, they have taken that punishment because they have seen their children as... So today, let us say there are parents, old parents, and they have been accused or abused by their grown-up children. What do the parents do? They are ready to take it up.
Yeah.
A lot of them, they put up with a lot of shit from the grown-up children because they are ultimately invested, they love their children.
Yeah.
in their well-being, they can suffer themselves. That is what the parents do. And that is exactly what as King and Queen Rama and Sita have done. Why are we unable to see that ideal as an ideal? Because we stop seeing them as the parents, the king and queen. We start seeing them as household individuals.
Right. And to sort of just ask that a bit further, are you saying that Sita accepted? It is not as if she was. I mean, and nobody wants to be chased away from their husband or their home. So you don't have to like it. But actually, there is a choice that is involved where she says she also realizes that life is more comfortable. I'm happier with my husband, but also accepts or actively chooses, as against accept because you have no other choice. But maybe she had a choice to either say yes or no to Rama and chooses to go to the forest for the larger good of the kingdom. Is that what you would think?
No, it's not shown that she had a choice.
Okay.
It was Rama's decision as a king and she abides by it.
Okay. So
she is consulted or anything.
So is her choice not taken into account? But because then that would be some kind of criticism of Rama.
Would not be, because he is the man there in the position, competent authority to make the decision. I mean, you can consult with your parties, everybody in the court, and say, is this punishment acceptable to you? But that's not how courts work. Right? There is a guy who is making a decision there.
And is that also specifically there in the Valmiki Ramayana, or is it not there in the Valmiki Ramayana?
Meaning?
This whole episode of how Sita is asked to leave the palace and go into exile.
That is there. So there is also a small precursor where she expresses her will to go to forest and all that.
Huh.
And then this news comes to Rama and he has to make a call. He says that, yeah, we'll have to leave her.
Okay.
And then she sent her. So initially, she's probably going to stay there for some time, all this. Then she eventually realizes then there itself that she is not getting audience with Rama because she's already been asked to leave all that.
Right.
Now, is that episode, can that be different? We know that it won't be different in any official scheme. We forget that as an official scheme and bring in a personal dynamic, which is where a lot of misunderstanding comes. No official system actually gives audience in that sense. No official system actually does a consultation in these matters. The decision comes top down. And as the king, he is the one to make the call there. And he had to make a call.
So another way of looking at it, rather than looking at this episode in isolation of a husband's treatment of his wife, it is more how somebody who believes that rules must be followed is principle all his life. So when he accepts Dasharatha's word to go to the forest, it is also an acceptance of the same principle. So he's, in terms of the principle, willing to put himself through it, and in acceptance of the principle, because that is his duty as king, is willing to put his wife through it, who he's not getting rid of his wife because he doesn't love her or he likes some other.
Doesn't see her different from him, right? He knows that his word and her conduct won't be any different. His word and her action are exactly the same. They always align.
So it is in that sense a big act of sacrifice, as against an act which should draw criticism.
Somebody for who you have destroyed a whole empire and got her back, why would you want to send her away?
Yeah. And so probably the more appropriate way to see it is, for a lot of the women, is that the husbands are not kings and they don't need to take those kinds of calls.
Exactly. But if that guy happens to be a king, now there is a Modi who has never lived with his wife. So it happens.
Right.
And that guy can also be an ideal ruler.
Yeah.
And there it is the ruler that is acting. It's not the husband that is acting.
And it is, as a husband, he makes the sacrifice of his rights as a husband in favor of he leans in favor of his duties as king over his rights as
an individual. Yes,
rights as an individual. So he sacrifices
duty also. In fact, his duty as an individual is to ensure she is not going through all that.
Yeah.
So his duty as a king has overruled that duty as an individual.
Right. So it is a poison pill that he takes. So it's not.
There is no easy choice.
Yeah. And it's the general sentiment. I mean, so how do you deal with public sentiment is really the question.
Yeah, and public sentiment, yes. Or either you leave the kingdom and deprive the kingdom of the ideal king, or you take it and you pay what you have to pay through your own life.
Or maybe one way of putting it is rather than, I mean, I would say that is to rule justly, is to say that we'll rule with certain and subject to certain rules. And if society believes that the king is doing something that is contrary to rule, then how does the king respond? Is there some way to communicate to society that it is not contrary? And so, therefore, how does the king respond in that circumstance? And if a sacrifice is what it takes, it is in the nature of a bit of a supreme sacrifice when that is the nature of relationship. So it's very hard actually if you have a strong romantic relationship with anybody, it is extremely hard to cut it out. So it is in
with
that
neither party at fault.
Yeah, and both end up being miserable when something like that happens. So it's not as if he's very happy to do it.
Obviously, he didn't get anybody.
Yeah, and so that is just that is his cross to bear. I mean, if I were using a Christian,
he took it as yes.
It is Rama's cross to bear, and he bears it for the good of humanity. So that's. But thanks. There, I have many other questions on the Ramayana, whether it is how Vali is dealt with and things like that. But maybe
we can probably
speak some other time. Anything that you would like to add, Shankara, on the video that I shared generally?
Yeah, I mean the general picture is the kind of contrast we try to bring and all that, but they never themselves saw those things. Whether it is Vishwanatha, Mulla, or Tulsi Goswami, nobody saw himself as putting a counter perspective to Valmiki. They were all, in their heart, they were loyal to Valmiki only. And this is where when people try to draw a contrast, they need to understand that, that is the original and this is a re-rendering suited to their times. Ramayana is timeless. Tulsi is not timeless. Or Vishwanatha is not timeless. Mulla is not timeless. They are suited to their age. And when they are suited to their age, they will also bring down those elements in a way that their contemporaries understand better. Which is how we need to see it rather than as a difference from Valmiki. Is what we also try to harmonize in our discussion. Right? In the same episode, when these people have differently narrated it, their goal is still the same.
Right.
They are trying to give the same message. Maybe they have removed some of the elements in terms of humanity or in terms of astronomical, but they have brought in other elements they thought they were more relevant, let us say in terms of bhakti, in terms of understanding divinity and things like that. Or that's how I would see any re-rendering.
Right. So it's more, it's more how you understand it in a different cultural context. And probably that's what you're saying is Tulsidas is narrating it where bhakti has become more prominent, bhakti of a certain kind.
Which means, exactly. Bhakti means surrendering yourself. And in that sense, he would also show Sita at her heart surrendering to her husband rather than, it's not exactly a anti-feminist position. It is just that he is showing the heart full with love and all those things.
Right. I mean, I think one needs to be, I think it will be a very lucky few who have extended strong romantic relationships. But anybody who's even been in a short romantic relationship, whether it is real romance or sometimes you just imagine that you have a romantic relationship with somebody, but you're completely subservient to that person at that point in time.
There is a mutual surrender. It's not unidirectional.
So anybody who relates back to that own personal experience knows what surrender is. And And I think when we say bhakti, it is that kind of, think of yourself in that sort of relationship with divinity, and that's why that surrender happens. So it's not surrender because you're being pressurized into surrender.
It's not exactly. It's not a human kind of dominance or anything.
Yeah. Well, thanks so much, Shankar. I'm sure there'll be
Nice.
conversations,
Catch up.
more conversations, explaining some of our scriptures, me asking those probing questions.
Yeah, but just I am not formally a scholar or anything. So
no, so it is, scholarship is not necessarily acquired only from a university.
No. Yeah, but even in terms of, let's say, traditionally, I'm not learned in Ramayana. We have read Ramayana just like others have read.
Yeah. And it is, when you talk about very typical scholars in Indian tradition, their ability to talk the modern language is limited.
That's the challenge. Yes.
Communicate with our generation is, or even the younger generation, is very limited because they talk so pure that it is immediately, people reject it.
Yeah, we'll need so many levels of translation to make it even, intelligible and probably, something you can relate to.
Yeah.
That's.
And I think that's where somebody like
that's where we come in. You and I can.
Works perfectly. Just translating that. But thanks so much.